Thanks, Alex. So yeah, I'm Brent Vatne. I work at Expo. I'm from Vancouver, which is about 10,000 kilometers away from here. Um, that's where my dog is, and she's great. Her name's Lucy. She's going to catch the ball. Just wait for it. She's pretty good at it. There we go. All right. So today I'm just going to talk about 10 reasons why you should try React Native, potentially again. So maybe you've tried it before. But actually, it's a little bit more than 3 years and 2 days now, because it was released on March 26, 2015. And kind of, I think something that comes along with any release of any highly hyped software is that there's going to be a lot of disappointment pretty quickly. People found very early on that it was buggy, it was unpolished, it was incomplete, didn't integrate with a lot of tools that existed. There were not a lot of learning resources, et cetera. All sorts of things that kind of go along with these sorts of projects. And it wasn't really specific to React Native. I mean, it had its own specific problems, but this kind of stuff is just inevitable, I think. And so I'm hoping that I can, maybe if you were jaded by an initial experience, or if you've heard bad things because of people who had a bad experience when it was first released or early on, I can kind of give you an update to how things have progressed in the last 3 years, and maybe you can give it a try. So before I move on, what is that thing in the bottom? So Expo is like, we like to say it's like Rails for React Native. It's not a perfect analogy, but it kind of is probably the most concise way to communicate it. So we kind of provide a set of APIs and workflows built on top of React Native. And the whole idea is to make it easier, faster to build and ship applications. So it's kind of like Create React App for React Native as well. In fact, Create React Native App uses Expo to work. So it is also literally Create React App for React Native. You can eject your project, get access to all the native configuration files, but you don't have to deal with any of that when you first start your project. These are the people that work on Expo, and a couple people that are missing, but yeah. So we're based out of Palo Alto. I work remotely in Vancouver. All right, going back to the topic at hand, 10 reasons why you should give it another try. So the first one is it is super easy to try it. Like, similar to how Code Sandbox, you can just drop in and open a project, have React loaded, type some stuff, change it, see it in your browser without installing anything on your computer. You can do the same thing with React Native now. At Expo, we built something that's quite similar in practice to Code Sandbox, and you can install NPM packages, upload assets, kind of do anything you want to play around with React Native in the browser. Or if you want, you can install the Expo Client app on your phone and load the thing that you're working on in your browser directly on your phone and see it there. It's also a file explorer, so you can do full projects there if you like. But probably most people will want to be within the comfort of their desktop editor. And so another way that you can get started easily is using this CLI tool called EXP. And so if you just have npm installed, you just npm i-g exp, and you have it. And so from there, you can just run exp init, create a project, open it up in your Expo Client app on your phone. Second reason is that there are a lot of libraries out there now, so you might not even need to know like Objective-C or Swift or Java or Kotlin or any of those things. It certainly doesn't hurt, but when React Native was first released, really there wasn't a lot of I guess, breadth of libraries available. So if you wanted to add a map to your application using like Google Maps, you kind of had to do that yourself. If you wanted to add a video to it, the same sort of thing. Push notifications. Really, it was pretty bare bones. Now there's thousands of libraries. We have a curated kind of directory of libraries at this website called native.directory. And so you can look through there and see what platforms are supported by which libraries. If there's an example available that can run in Snack, which was the in-browser editor that I just showed, then you can click through and try it out right away in the browser. And There's some other great stuff like UI libraries like React Native Paper, which Luke, who's here, is working on along with some other people at this company called CallStack. As you can see, it's quite nice and works on both platforms, and you just drop it in your project and use it. That's been something that people have kind of long been wanting in React Native, is to have like a solid UI library beyond what you get with the platform primitives. And so I think this is a nice path there. With Expo, you actually don't even need to install third-party packages a lot of the time, because it comes with sort of this set of APIs just out of the box that you can use on any new project, or you can use in Snack. You can see on there's like camera, all sorts of things, SVG, Lottie, which is a really great animation library from Airbnb. There's gesture handler. You can actually even use OpenGL with this OpenGL view. There's a repository on the Expo GitHub called Native Component List, and you can clone that and run it on your machine and see everything sort of in action and see code samples and play with that, and it's a nice, easy way to do that. On the other side, you see a demo of using ARKit, which is also available within Expo, although it doesn't expose the full API currently. You can do things like make ducks float and walk around them. Probably about as useful as all other ARKit apps, honestly. So you can use OpenGL for all sorts of things like this. And this library currently is not available outside of Expo, but we're kind of working on making all these APIs available in a separate kind of package that doesn't depend on any Expo services, so that the SDK kind of becomes like the standard library for React Native apps, whether you're using Expo or not using Expo. And so hopefully that'll also help improve the ecosystem even more. And that's not too far off now. Third point, it's really a perfect tool, I think, for your next hobby or hack day project. So there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that you probably shouldn't just jump in and use it on a client project or on a project at your business without trying to build something with it first. Thankfully, unlike I think when I try and learn a lot of different tools, it's hard to find like a use case for how you might use something or what you might build in order to kind of learn more about the tool. But it's pretty easy, I think. In fact, I'm told frequently of everyone's great ideas for mobile apps. So, if you've ever had an idea for a mobile app, why not give it a try and use React Native and kind of see how it goes. But in addition to that, there's some other perks that make it actually especially good for building mobile apps as kind of a hack day project. One of them is that, everyone here is familiar with JavaScript already, so that's pretty easy sell. But in addition to that, it's, you get this cross-platform code that works on iOS and Android, and if you want to be able to share stuff with your friends or build something like a conference app, you don't want to take the time to write it twice for both platforms. It's also really easy to distribute the app without uploading it to the Play Store, so you can actually just open the Expo client on Android, scan a QR code, and you have the app on your phone. On iOS, unfortunately, you can't do that because of the App Store restrictions, but it's pretty easy to, if you use Expo or not, you can use App Center and those kinds of things. It's like build a binary and just ship it up to the App Store. Here's an example of kind of a hobby project that I really liked. This guy built his name's John Samp. He works at Code Academy. He built this app for teaching people how to make this fancy coffee, and it seems to be pretty well liked. He's got up there on the top charts. It all kind of started off with just him at work wanting to teach his coworkers how to make coffee, and then went and made this, and it's turned out to be a pretty fun, productive project for him. So definitely a good way to give the tool a try anyways. But it's also production ready, right? So there are a lot of big names associated with the project at this point. There's the Bloomberg app, there's Facebook on the Marketplace tab, which is implemented in React Native. On the right, there's the Skype app, which is implemented in React Native for iOS, Android, and the Universal Windows platform. Microsoft actually built a renderer for UWP for React Native, and they continue to maintain that. They have another project called React XP, which kind of tries to unify web, UWP, Android, and iOS into one code base, and that's technically what they're using for this as well. Other smaller organizations use it as well. I mean, Discord, I guess, is getting pretty large now, but you may have heard of this company called Gyroscope, where they help you kind of visualize your life and track a bunch of metrics associated with your life. I have to be careful not to show some embarrassing stuff there, so I've trimmed that one a little bit. There's this great app called Third Wave that's made by a core contributor to React Native, Yannick, and it's for finding coffee in Montreal, and they're expanding it all across Canada. It's a really neat app. These are just a few of the apps that are out there. There's quite a few. Feel free to come up and talk to me later. I can show you some more. The fifth reason is the developer tools and editor integrations are getting a lot better. So it's not perfect still, but and certainly not as good as the web, which I think is really a fantastic development environment. But it's definitely getting there. Visual Studio Code has really nice integrations with React Native. Microsoft and the team at VS Code actually built this themselves, and so it works great. No complaints. You can use the Chrome user timing API to profile your app. You can actually debug your code in Chrome as well, so pretty similar probably to what you're all familiar with at this point. You can use the React DevTools to inspect your app and look at state, highlight different views in your app, change the props, see it reflected immediately inside of the app, kind of similar to what you would experience in a browser. Again, not quite as polished at this point, but it works quite well. There's hot reloading out of the box. So here I'm just changing some properties. You can see it's reloading the screen without actually reloading the app at all, and even showing warnings, recovering from errors, etc. Sixth reason is that there is a growing ecosystem of services. So I mentioned App Center before. This is also from Microsoft. It works for a lot of different app development platforms. You don't need to use React Native to use it. You don't need to, I guess, you can pretty much just use anything with it at the moment, but they do have really good React Native integration. And other big vendors like Amazon, like at AWS, they're really getting invested in React Native. All of their new products include guides for how to integrate them into React Native. They have SDKs that integrate the products into React Native. So there's this project called AppSync, which is a GraphQL as a service. I highly recommend checking out a talk from Richard at React Amsterdam last week, where he talks about a lot of it. It's actually generally available now, so definitely check that out as well. Lots of services like Sentry, pretty much the full suite of things that you would need to build a mobile application. All these different services now offer React Native integrations and consider it sort of a first-class platform. And of course, Expo, I have to mention that one. Seventh reason is the over-the-air updates for apps in the App Store and Play Store. So I'm just going to stop the question that's going to show up on Slido later on. Yes, you're allowed to do that on the App Store. Feel free to Google that exact question, and you'll find a million answers to it because people ask it every day. And on the Play Store, of course, you can pretty much do whatever you want. Google doesn't really care. And so what I mean by over-the-air updates is you can actually have someone who's installed the app from the App Store or Play Store, and you have maybe created a bug fix, and you don't want to have to go through this process of waiting for a day or two in order to push this bug fix to your users. So you can actually just publish the updated JavaScript bundle and any assets associated with it. There are some limitations, but for the most part, most of the changes that you'd need to make, you can actually do using this, and you can specify policies in the application for when it should download the updates. Should it be over Wi-Fi? Should it be on certain types of connections, or that kind of thing? So a couple of services. I think these are the two main ones that people use. There's Code Push from Microsoft yet again. And Expo has it built in, so you actually don't even need to configure anything when you use Expo. It just exists out of the box. The web and code sharing story is getting a lot better. So already, I think the classic example of this is the Twitter PWA. So Nicholas Gallagher, who was working at Twitter, built their progressive web app using React Native. And along the way, he built this library called React Native Web, which you can see on the other side, which basically maps the React Native components to their equivalents on the web. And the example apps that are shown there are actually apps that are included in the React Native repository, and they're just copied as is and run on the web using this library. But beyond Twitter, there's actually quite a few other companies that you might recognize using this. Flipkart, which is one of the biggest e-commerce companies in India. PlayStation, Uber, Major League Soccer. Actually, you probably don't recognize, it's football. Yeah. Major League Soccer, though, has kind of an interesting set of blog posts about how they went about integrating React Native Web into their application and sharing logic between platforms. They have this kind of idea of you have things that are specific to the web, specific for mobile, and then you have in the middle these universal components. The way they kind of I guess the heuristic they use is if a component does not include other custom components, then you pretty much would consider that for inclusion. So if it's just something that renders down to a host component, or some people call it like a leaf component, so like view, text, or for web people, that'd be like div and span and that kind of thing. Those are typically good candidates for universal components. And this is the Storybook, which is kind of like a style guide application, the Storybook for components that are shared between the MLS, iOS, Android, and web apps. You can actually try this out really easily right now as well. If you install Create React Native App, you can run Create React Native App example, or whatever name of the project you want, and add the -- with web support flag. It's still pretty experimental in Create React Native App, and so that's why we put it behind a flag. But when you do that, you essentially get a project where you can write code in a way where you're just importing directly from React Native, have it loading into the simulator at the same time as in the browser. Clearly, this is a very simple example, but as I've shown, you can use React Native Web for some pretty complicated stuff as well. So the ninth one is the powerful gesture and animation APIs. This is one of the things that actually led me sort of to give up on using Cordova a while ago, was just I ran into too many restrictions in what you could do with gestures and animations. I'm sure in many ways it's improved a lot, but it's still not quite there. And there's just some pretty neat stuff that you can't quite do yet on the web, which makes it really fun for people who've come from the web and want to experiment with building these types of things, or actually just build it and use it in your application. So the example that you see on, what's that, your left is inside of that native component list project that I mentioned before. And so you can see that these gestures are, I mean, they're 60 frames per second. They look and feel like what they would in any other native app. And in fact, they look and feel like that because they are using the gesture recognizers that are native to the platform. So it uses the iOS gesture recognizer for pinch, for rotate, for pan. It uses all of this, and it's actually also capable of running those gestures on the UI thread. You can kind of think of it as similar to how with CSS you're able to use GPU acceleration with certain CSS properties, and by doing so you offload the work for doing the animations to somewhere else outside of the JavaScript thread. In this case, you're able to offload the gesture handling and the animations that occur in response to that to the UI thread. So you end up with situations where you can have 60 frames per second for your gestures and the animations in response to them, even if you are blocking the JavaScript thread for a second or half a second or however long, and it really doesn't matter. Here's an example of an experimental new project that's kind of actually taking a step back and thinking like, basically the stuff I just showed you before, there was basically one small limitation, which was that when you release the gesture, you still have to call back into JavaScript and say, okay, here's my current state. What do I do now? Should I continue this gesture with some velocity in that direction? Should I abort it? What should I do? And so it turns out that that's something that actually takes a considerable amount of work to solve. And so a guy named Christoph Majera, who used to work at Facebook on React Native and now works for Software Mansion in Krakow, Poland, he has been working on a complete reimplementation of the gesture handler API and animated API in order to support doing the full life cycle of a gesture entirely on the UI thread by using declarative configuration on the JavaScript thread. So as you can see, in this case, the JavaScript thread is almost entirely blocked. I think actually the number it's reporting there, 1, is incorrect, and I think it is entirely blocked. And it's still able to handle these gestures and handle release, follow through with velocity, and all that kind of stuff, which is really quite interesting. But I think this also leads us to another really cool thing about React Native is that you can kind of use React Native as a playground to experiment with different ideas for how to improve limitations with web technology. So it's a lot easier to do it than to learn how to hack on Chrome, for example. You can open up, create a React Native project immediately, or you have a lot of primitives available to you that already exist with platform APIs. And you can kind of dream up your ideal API of how you want something to look in JavaScript and just have a crack at implementing it in whatever platform you're dealing with here. And a great thing about that is you can then just go ahead and also use it in your apps if you want. You can share it with other people. And overall, it's just a neat way to kind of explore, I think, new ideas that would be more difficult to do on the web. The 10th and last reason is that there are plenty of learning resources. I mentioned earlier on that there wasn't a lot available when React Native was first released. The documentation was pretty sparse. Of course, nobody had used it and written up blog posts and tutorials. And then there was a period after that where people did write blog posts and tutorials, but the releases came at such a rapid clip that the blog posts and tutorials were all out of date by the next month or two. And so it led to a lot of difficulty early on. But now it's got to the point where Harvard Extension School actually has a course entirely built around React Native. It's called Mobile App Development with React Native. So you can actually check that out. The lectures are all online, along with the video and exercises and slides. Egghead, which I'm sure a bunch of you already use, has a lot of different video courses on how to use React Native. There are some books out there now. Maybe some of you have read the Full Stack React book. I think they have one about Angular as well, maybe Full Stack Angular. Or I think actually, no, maybe it's called NG Book. And so those same people made this Full Stack React Native book, which is quite good. It's kind of example-driven approach. And then, of course, O'Reilly getting in the game. There are some video tutorials that I did. So this is from a workshop at React Europe last year. We did a 2-day workshop, recorded the entire thing, put it on YouTube. So you can absolutely go and watch that and learn a lot pretty much from the ground up how to use React Native. There's a website called reactnativeexpress.com, which is really great for kind of getting you up to speed with the basics and helping you basically just get your foot in the door. And then from there, you can hopefully understand where you need to look next, depending on what you want to build. So my recommendation, if you want to get started, is to check out reactnativeexpress.com first. Read it over, fill in any gaps in your knowledge, whether you're coming from React or Angular or wherever. This will help you to get started. You can play around with Snack in your browser without installing anything on your computer. Work on a side project that excites you. And of course, if you're actually going to use this with your business in a production app, you should absolutely research the trade-offs. Come talk to me about it. I have plenty to say about it. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.